Support the podcast trusted by higher ed leaders. Get early, ad-free access and exclusive leadership content by supporting Elvin and Joe for only $5.99 a month or $44.99 a year. You can also donate or gift a subscription at edupexperience.com. That's edupexperience.com.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Dr. Joe Salustio back with you on another episode as we march hard and fast to 1,100 episodes and over 500,000 downloads of this podcast, which would not be possible without you, our amazing listeners and supporters that keep us going. And when I say keep us going, I mean Monday through Friday recording, Monday through Friday production. Elvin Freitas and I, co-founders of this podcast, doing this in our spare time, early mornings and late nights, in bathrooms and garages and wherever we can find time, away from the kids and family when they go to sleep. That's how we roll here at the EdUp Experience. We're very real people with very real challenges, just like you, the amazing colleagues that we have across higher education, serving students. And what a time to be in higher education. If it's not something that you can roll with, you're in the wrong industry, because we are just adapting to change on an everyday basis. And that's in a normal environment. And what I would say is we're having very abnormal things happen across the world these days. We're fighting with and gripping with artificial intelligence, with micro-credentials, the rising cost of education, loan debt, all these things that are still sort of in the background as we see and hear news about regulatory challenges. All the regular challenges that we face, we still have to deal with. So it's a lot. And the President Series that we bring you here on the EdUp Experience is a time for you to hear from other leaders in higher education, your colleagues, about what is going well, what are the challenges, how do we work together to overcome these challenges and continue to serve students with something that you just cannot replace, and that is an education, the foundation of our society, blah, blah, blah. You all know this. What you don't know is that, and I keep plugging it, so you probably should know, is that if you like to write, and by write I mean sit and type, because you probably don't use a pen and paper anymore, articles about what's going on at your university, about something you have an opinion on, about something that you want to predict, you can submit those articles to EdUp Editorials, and we will publish them and push them out to our worldwide global audience. You can submit those to Elvin or I at our regular emails. You can send them to EdUp at edupeditorials.com. I know it's like super, they're EdUp at edupexperience.com, I should say. It's very easy to find us and submit those articles, and it gives you a medium, and we give you a medium to celebrate the work that you do when you want to tell people what's going on. And with that, we continue the President Series today by bringing on, I would say, a very unique individual who is going to tell a unique story about higher education at the university in which he leads. Ladies and gentlemen, he's Jim Enrique Tolbert. He's the chancellor at Universidad Santander, USA. Jim, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you, and thank you for having me today.
No, I'm glad you're here, because when we first spoke and you were telling me about the Universidad Santander, I was like, wait a minute. Why don't I know that this university is doing what it's doing? So give the audience the same shock and awe that you gave me. Tell us about the Universidad Santander and who you serve and how you serve them.
Thank you, Joe. I do appreciate it. And I really do think we're providing a rather unique higher education experience in the United States. Universidad Santander is a private university based in Mexico. It has campuses throughout Mexico, and it is authorized through the equivalent of the Department of Education / accrediting bodies of Mexico, and that agency is called Secretaría de Educación Pública, SEP. They have campuses throughout Mexico, as I mentioned, and they've expanded significantly throughout the Spanish-speaking world through distance education. And I have been incredibly privileged with helping them enter the U.S. market. And there's several things that I think that we do that as I mentioned, provide a very unique opportunity in higher education. First of all, our degree programs are taught online, and they're taught in Spanish. And our degrees are at the bachelor's, master's, and doctorate level. As I mentioned, these are authorized by the Secretaría de Educación Pública, SEP, but they are the equivalent of U.S. degrees. In addition to all of that, our bachelor's degrees are $9,000, and that's not per year, but the total cost of our degree is $9,000.
Amazing.
Our education model is competency-based learning, and several universities have made this well known in the United States, not the least of which is Western Governors University, which has been doing the competency-based learning model for several years. It is something that's recognized by the Department of Education. Federal financial aid is dispersed on this model, and that is exactly the model that we have. Now, in order to be awarded our bachelor's degree, there are 40 modules, and each module is approximately a month. And an individual can take anywhere from between 1 and 4 modules simultaneously. So, in order to complete 40 modules, taking 4 at a time, an individual can be awarded a bachelor's degree in 10 months. And again, this is a huge, unique value proposition that we offer, is not only the cost, not only the fact that it's done online, but that it's taught in Spanish and can be completed in 10 months for $9,000. Now, we have 2 primary students that we think benefit from our university. And the first is non-English speaking Latino immigrants in the United States. I have asked this question over the several years I've been doing this of every Latino organization I've worked with. Are you aware of anybody else doing what we are doing? And I have yet to come up with an alternative of another university that can award bachelor's degrees and master's and doctorates that are taught in Spanish online. So we are a huge opportunity for the immigrant population. Joe, you started off this episode, as I'm sure you do every episode, talking about the incredible value of higher education. And one of the many things I'm very proud of to be an American is I really believe we are a meritocracy. And one of the fundamentals of success in America is education. And for a large percentage of our population that doesn't speak English, there are no other alternatives for career and professional advancement based on academics. And that's where we think we play a very important role. In addition to everything I've just described, our programs are, and by the way, feel free, listener, to go to Unisant, UNISANT.us, to look at our website. It is in both Spanish and in English, but you will see that our programs are very career focused. We don't offer traditional liberal arts degrees. We offer degrees in business, in accounting, in education, in technology, tourism, and various other areas that we think will lead to gainful employment opportunities. So that's the essence of what we provide, and very excited about offering that, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about this and some of the problems or obstacles we deal with in higher education, accessibility, affordability, the debt, all of these things seem to have been solved by this model. And particularly when you're dealing with an immigrant population, you don't want to saddle these people with debt. They're not coming to the table with a lot, but you want them to leave the table with the opportunity to make a lot. And that seems to be what you're doing.
That's exactly what we're doing, Joe. And I will tell you, there are 2 populations of people that will benefit from what we do. Not only the non-English speaking population that I mentioned before, but also there is a large proportion of people who live in the United States that are here legally, but do not have access to higher education because they are, for example, DACA students. And most universities require Social Security numbers in order to enroll in university. And unfortunately, that is a somewhat, it seems like a small logistical issue, but it's a huge barrier. So we are also finding a number of our students are bilingual DACA recipients who, again, otherwise don't have access to higher education in the United States.
What does this look like for you as you talked at the beginning, enter the U.S. market? What does that look like? And how has the reception been? And what have some of the challenges and successes so far?
Well, I will be the first to admit, Joe, this has been harder than I thought it was going to be. And I really thought, as does most founders, inventors, oh, look, I've invented a better mousetrap. People are going to beat a path to my door. And obviously that rarely happens. We have two primary ways we're communicating our offering. I call one bottom up and the other top down. Bottom up is doing what most universities do. We're making ourselves known on social media and other platforms of digital marketing to enroll in our university. We get our share of leads, but that's one way. But the other way that we're doing is trying to network with Latino organizations in the United States. And there is a large number of incredibly value-added social services and other organizations to assist the Latino community. And the conversations I've had with literally dozens of leaders at these organizations is, we offer an opportunity to help the immigrant population who your organization is here to serve. And what type of services do they provide? I mean, you can imagine it's healthcare, it's legal services, it's housing, it's sort of the basics and fundamentals of life. And as I said, when I started this conversation, I said, I've asked all of them, are you aware of any that are offering higher education to your community? And I have yet to find another alternative for the population we're serving. So that having been said, one of the struggles is the adoption of what we're doing has gone a lot slower than I thought. Mm-hmm. So then the question is why? What have the barriers been? And I've had these incredibly blunt conversations with leaders in the Latino community and trying to figure out why this thing hasn't been picked up. Now, not the least of which is the Latino immigrant community is going through some very challenging times right now.
Yep.
And I will keep politics out of this conversation, whether it's right or whether it's wrong. That having been said, there's a lot of stress in the community right now with status and deportations and whatnot. So things like education could seem almost like a luxury, for that. So then, when you get beyond that, there are, and I, again, have had Latino leaders share this with me, a number of, probably cultural barriers to getting a higher education. And I've had more than one individual tell me I was not encouraged to go to college. It was something I had to fight through in order to achieve. So whereas in other communities, including the household I grew up in, where higher education was a top priority, I think a lot of the Latino households in America don't find it that way. It is more about you need to go to work and you need to go to work now. And there are a lot of good jobs and there's a lot of well-paying jobs. So it's hard to pass that up, thinking about sort of the long-term benefits. But what the community is finding is that's great. You got a good job. You're supporting your family. Good for you. But what are you doing when you're 50, 60 years old? What is your body like, after working construction for 30, 40 years? What does your retirement fund look like, your 401k? And unfortunately, a lot of those benefits don't come with the types of jobs that are readily available to young people without a college degree.
When you start listing out the characteristics of your, just say your bachelor's degree program, and you say $9,000 bachelor degree, competency-based education, 40 modules a month each, you could graduate in 10 months, if you take 4 modules at a time, so on. Traditional higher education in the United States, you're blowing everybody's doors off. And that comes not without its challenges when you try to enter the market, so to speak. Those institutions that go, well, this can't possibly be a quality education. They're not taking the 4 years for this degree. How could you do something this fast in 10 months? And blah, 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 blah. You know this, and I know this because I talk to so many that have different kinds of models. The traditional higher ed says if it's not the model that we understand, it can't possibly be a quality model. The accreditation pieces, and so you have this inside out fight, or maybe an outside in fight that you have to, for legitimacy in a space that is very slow to adopt change, even within, CBE has been around for a long time, yet very few institutions have adopted it for whatever reason. It's for them hard to think about direct assessment or credit-based, competency-based education. It's hard to understand assessment and changing the model and the speed and the service, and all of a sudden everything becomes 24/7 instead of 8 to 5, and that's against the traditional model. Are you seeing the incumbency of higher education be less welcoming than you thought?
It's a good question, Joe. And Joe, I spent pretty much my entire career in trades education. And I say this proudly, I ran a for-profit trade school for many years.
I've worked in for-profits for 15 years myself, so that's why I know I have direct knowledge of this.
Well, that you have your share of skin knees and war stories about what you asked about, and I dealt with exactly what you're describing, so I know exactly what you're describing. And, over the years that I was active in that industry, in that sector, and by the way, I also had the privilege of being the chairman of the National Association, the Career College Association. So spent my fair share of time on Capitol Hill doing PR and GR. And we were fighting those battles every day. And a lot of folks were discrediting what we did, not the least of which was, we were taking a lot of market share away from traditional higher ed, and they saw it, unfortunately, as a zero-sum game. And so we were getting a lot of that pushback in what we are doing. I can't tell you in what I'm doing now, the pushback is from traditional higher ed. In fact, one of the things we just recently did was we signed a matriculation agreement with Dallas College. Dallas College is one of the largest community colleges in the United States. I'm based in Dallas myself. And, I see a huge opportunity for synergies between us and Dallas College. I don't want their student, and they can't serve my student. But there's a huge there's a huge not next to each other, abutting each other, complementariness.
Complementary, yes. It took you a while to get it out, but I knew what you were talking about.
There's a huge amount of complementariness between what they do and what we do. And we're trying to overall serve the communities that we're in. We're trying to overall, provide education for the community at large. And if they serve a certain population or we're serving a different population, we have every reason to coordinate and to help each other educate the community.
There's somebody financial sitting on this call going, how do you make any money with $9,000? How do you make any margin? No margin, no mission. I mean, the self-paced is great because because the student, you have less overhead costs and so on, but you still have administrative costs and student support costs. But how does this work?
Well, and this
without giving away the secret sauce, Jim. I mean, you can't give away everything.
Well, and I'm gonna state the obvious. It's kind of why global trade works, and each country provides what they are can provide at the highest competency and at the lowest cost. Our labor's in Mexico. It's that simple. Our professors are in Mexico. We are providing our education at Mexican wages, and that is what allows us to do what we do and still be very successful as an institution of higher education.
So what does this look like for you? I mean, there's a overarching strategic goal? Is it, 10,000, 100,000, 10 million students in the United States? I mean, how does that look for you?
Well, it depends on what source you look at. The Latino community is huge in the United States, and it is growing. And when you look at the data, there are, people have easily assessed, there's potentially 30 million Latinos in the United States. The most recent data I looked at is 15% of them are non-English speaking. Now, the good news is 85% of them are English speaking, but 15% of 30 million is a very large number. And when you look at kind of what college participation rates are in the United States, and this is something I very frequently have this conversation with the leaders of these Latino communities, the overall college participation rate in the United States is roughly 30%. In the Latino community, it is under 9%. And again, there's some obvious reasons why it's so low, not the least of which is language and cost, which we think we've solved. And so where I think about bringing the Latino community just to national averages of college participation rates, to go from 9% to 30% is huge. Now, I'll tell you, Joe, and this is a very sensitive topic I'll bring up. A lot of people also come back to me and say, what the problem is? It's racism. That there are people that it's tougher for people of color in this in this country to go to college. Well, excuse my potential insensitivity to this issue. I look at the South Asian community, the Indian community. 72% of South Asian households go to college, and so I don't find the South Asian community is saying, "Oh, we're dark skinned, we're people of color. That's the barrier to entry." And I think once you get beyond those potential concerns, that the upside of going to college is tremendous.
Now, one of the things that I was reading that that the university is invested in is like a teacher training. You've got a focus on like PD, professional development for educators, personal and professional development for the teachers, specialized programs, research, teaching, management, innovation within the academic offerings, right? So the professional development for educators, and then professional development that or skills-based training that's going to allow students to go and get jobs. There's this practitioner vibe throughout the entire ecosystem. How big of a focus is that, and how big of a focus will that remain?
Stay ahead of the conversation in higher ed. Get early, ad-free access, and exclusive leadership content by supporting Elvin and Joe. $5.99 per month or $44.99 a year. You can also donate or gift a subscription at edupexperience.com. That's edupexperience.com.
Yeah, and that's a good question. By the way, I made this assertion at the outset. These are U.S. equivalent degrees. And beyond me expressing my opinion, I would like to share with you the fact base by which I say that. There is an entire industry in this country that evaluates foreign degrees. And this is very relevant for going to graduate school. It's very relevant for getting licensing. And the organization that sort of authorizes these other organizations to evaluate foreign degrees is called NACIS. And we submitted our programs to one of the NACIS approved programs and said, would you tell us whether this is a U.S. equivalent? And they went through the same evaluation of our degrees that they would have for any other foreign university. And they said, yes, this is the equivalent of a U.S. degree. And one of the things we proudly display on our website is a letter from Joseph Silney and Associates, one of the NACIS approved organizations that evaluated our degrees and said, this is a U.S. equivalent. Mm-hmm. So one of the questions I will often get is this accredited in the U.S.? My answer is no, this could not be accredited in the U.S. It's not taught English. The only way this works is by doing an online degree from a foreign university. So there's a little bit of a, how come nobody's done this before? It requires that sort of alignment of logistics to make this work. But as I said, hey, if you graduated from Cambridge or Oxford or University of Heidelberg, you would go through the same process of evaluating your foreign degree as we did. So you asked a question about education. And in fact, education is our largest area of study. And we're very proud that we consider ourselves a teacher's college. And not only do we do a bachelor's degree in education, we do a master's and a doctorate. In many school districts in the United States, there are opportunities to earn more money, get a higher salary, get pay raises through achieving higher levels of higher education. We provide a very cost-effective way for teachers that need to speak English, speak Spanish, achieve master's and doctorate levels. So this is beyond the CEU, it's actually getting the degree. But there's yet a whole nother strategy that we have, Joe, that also touches upon what you're describing. We have a lot of shortages in our workforce today. This is something that has been written about extensively. McKinsey recently came out with a study about workforce shortages, and it's really driven by demographics. We are aging as a population. We don't have enough young people entering a lot of professions, and as such, we have a lot of shortages. And a lot of those shortages were exacerbated by COVID. And one of the professions that was one of the hardest hit was, one is healthcare workers, but the other were teachers. We lost a lot of teachers during COVID, during a time when we could not afford it as a society. So one of our strategies is we are recruiting eligible candidates from around the world to come to the United States to get licensed as teachers. And there are only 2 requirements that you need to meet in order to be eligible for this program. And being a teacher is not one of them. You need to have a bachelor's degree or greater, and you need to speak English. And by speaking English, that either means one of 2 things. You are in a country that is English speaking, there's an official list of those countries, or you have passed the test of English as a foreign language to qualify to get your teacher's license. If you meet those 2 criteria, you are then eligible to go through a process that we've created in order to get a teacher's license. Now, we would love to be doing a lot of recruiting in Spanish-speaking countries because one of our critical shortage areas within the teaching profession are bilingual teachers, given the size of the Latino population in America. It is challenging to find bilingual college graduates that can get through this program. As such, we have recruited heavily in English-speaking countries, primarily in Africa and in South Asia, in India. Now, one of the questions I will get is, well, how do you get a visa to work in the U.S.? Isn't that the biggest barrier to entry? And the answer is typically yes. However, there is an incredible exemption to getting a H-1B visa to work in the U.S. And typically when tech companies, for example, recruit tech workers to come on the H-1B, there is an over demand for eligible visas in this country. And so applicants have to go through a lottery. And estimates vary, but some people say you've got a 5% probability of winning that lottery to get into the U.S. The incredible exemption to that cap on the H-1Bs, if you're coming to work for a not-for-profit or a government agency, which a private school or a school district would meet that eligibility.
Let's go.
If you are applying to an employer that's a not-for-profit or a government agency and has the exemption, you don't need to go through the lottery. So if someone wanted to come work legally in the United States, come into the U.S. as a teacher through the H-1B program is about one of the easiest ways to achieve that.
You just made the list.
So what happens that way? I like an exemption. I like a good exemption.
This is a great exemption.
I want to go back to the educational model real fast because not a lot of that's an assumption. Let me restate. I believe, it's my personal opinion, that there aren't many out there that truly understand a CBE program. And when someone comes on, and I've done the same, and I'm going to communicate the program length to a student, I'm going to give them the absolute best case scenario. You know, like if you take 4 mods at once, continuously without a break, you can complete this degree in 10 months. That's the fastest you're going to do it. And I know that probably, at least in my experience, 90% of the students, maybe 95% of the students, aren't going to complete it in 10 months. They're going to take a break because they have a job or they have kids or they have all these things. And so when we communicate that out from a marketing perspective to students, and then higher ed writ large hears it and they go, oh my gosh, 10 months, this is not possible. Not realizing that it's probably going to be 24 months or 36 months before the student gets through all those courses, especially if you talk of adult student who is working, has children, there's breaks. There's also a huge retention effort into this when you're dealing with CBE paced. It's very easy for them to stop. It's very them to just stop working and let this class continue on and then think, well, maybe I just, go back in 6 months. And so there's this proactive intrusive advising model that has to take place. Would you pull back the rug on the reality of this? It seems when we talk about it, it seems like just all buttoned up and perfect and super easy and fast. In reality, it's not unlike any other program that we have to be really great with retention, and students are stopping in and stopping out, and it takes a little bit longer than we communicate it.
Yeah, and Joe, you have summarized this perfectly. There's sort of the theoretical fastest you can do it, and then there's the reality of it. And it is difficult for our students, an adult learner, to sort of sit there and allocate the time required to take 4 of these modules, we call them, at one time and maintain that pace for 10 months. So I can only just agree with everything you just said. 10 months is the theoretically fastest you could do it. And obviously some people do it in 10 months, but in reality, people are going to stretch this out over a 3.5-year time period, taking one module at a time.
Yeah, and it's just an important distinction, and I'm sorry, I was hoping you'd do all the explanation, but I sort of did it because I'm passionate about it, because I think there's misnomers, there's misunderstanding that there aren't thousands of students graduating with bachelor's degrees in 10 months, although that would be fantastic for them and for us as a community. Students are going to have the same problems they would have in any kind of higher education program. They're going to drop out and stop out, and we're going to work to get them back in. And in a self-paced program, it's actually even more difficult from a retention standpoint, because you've got to, you sometimes there's like this airspace. All of a sudden, all these assignments come through, or all these competencies get checked up because the student took time away to learn and they came back, versus this check mark gets hit and you're tracking student progress. So it changes the way you think and have to think, and you have to open your mind to new possibilities and maybe accept a little bit of risk that you aren't used to accepting.
Yeah, and the point you made is I think spot on. And by the way, I went to traditional Ivy League school, and I sat there and I took exams, and it took me 4 years to get my bachelor's degree and whatnot. And I think when generations of people have gone through that education model, and they're used to sitting in a lecture, they're used to taking midterms and final exams, it's hard to think maybe there is an alternative way to measure learning or to educate our population. And it's slow, but it's gaining acceptance. And I think the competency-based model, particularly as I mentioned earlier, when schools like Western Governors, have totally embraced this, and then the Department of Education is dispersing federal financial aid based on this model, I think the legitimacy of that is going to be accepted a lot more.
I had you brought up WGU just as a U.S. equivalent to what you're doing. One of my coworkers went through and got a master's degree in 5 months. She disappeared. She came to work 8 to 5, and then I never saw her for 5 straight months. And she went home and she crushed it. And she's sharp as a tack. And so you look at this as a legitimate educational model. It is helping students drastically reduce debt. It's also putting the control in the hands of the student, which they are expecting more of. I think that students expect more control over their educational journey than they ever have before, because they have those same expectations of their cell phone. When they want something to happen, they better click. And so there's this command and control feeling of students of having some level of control over their educational journey. Do you think that's true? Do you think students want more control?
Absolutely. And I mentioned a moment ago that I've spent the bulk of my career in for-profit post-secondary education. And I think that sector of education, University of Phoenix, is also another example of a very large, successful institution in this space, DeVry. And I think that a big buzzword we always use was student-centric. that we were able to meet the students where they were, whether it's technology, whether it's physical. And, our classrooms were not fancy campuses. They were in, high traffic retail outlets. And it made it easier for our students to get to class and stick with it. So I really think, and I would certainly encourage higher education, of which I am the proud recipient of traditional higher ed, to think more about how they can meet the students where they are, because the last thing I think we need as a country is people opting out of higher ed. And unfortunately, we are seeing some declines in college participation rates in this country right now. And unless traditional higher ed sort of says, how do we meet the students where they are? How do we maintain the legitimacy, the credibility of what we're doing? But how do we make it more student centric? And unless higher ed figures that out, I think it's going to struggle.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
I like different. I think our industry needs more different. This is a really different model. And when you bring in the Spanish, the Espanol here, one of the things that hit me is, are all of the vendors like the LMS and the SIS and CRM vendors, is all of that in English, or is all of that in Spanish? And are you finding vendors really throughout Latin America because they have to serve everything in Spanish?
No, actually, everything we do is in Spanish, and we actually have a proprietary LMS and a proprietary SIS, and so we are not outsourcing that. But there's a robust online delivery of education throughout the Spanish-speaking world, and there are no shortage of vendors that can provide those services that you just described in Spanish. But we have had the benefit of developing our technology internally.
One of the last questions I have before we start wrapping up, there was a UNESCO group that was talking about micro-credentials and skills in Latin America, and they're trying to put some kind of framework around it throughout Latin America. And I'm thinking about what you said about career-focused programs. How, are you building in skills and micro-credentials for these students because they're going out into the workforce? And is there a build within the CBE that they're getting micro-credentials or badging throughout it?
That's an excellent question. I'm very familiar with what you're describing. Our education model is not as focused on that as I know some U.S. institutions are. But I cannot agree more that the micro-credentialing is critical. Now, we actually offer another program. We are exclusive partners with Becker CPA Prep that is one of the largest and most successful preparation companies for the CPA exam. Yep. And we are providing that service to accountants in Mexico and helping them get their credentials in the United States, not only to be certified public accountants, but certified management accountants, certified internal auditors. And we also do CEUs in the accounting in partnership with Becker as well.
Yeah, that's right. Like those CEUs are really important to continue on for so many students. And, as you look forward, you're breaking into the market. You're bringing this very unique educational model in Spanish to the United States. Where are you now? Where do you see yourself, going? Give us the outlook. Give us a 5-year.
So first of all, here's another question I will often get: where's your campus in the United States? And the answer is we don't have one.
I figured that out. That's why I didn't ask it, because I heard you say online education. I'm like, I'm not going to be that guy that asks where your campus is.
No, but I get that question all the time, and the answer is we don't have one. We don't plan to have one, because once you have built brick and mortar in the United States, you are then subjecting yourself to the whole U.S. regulatory environment.
Yeah, that's right.
And as a regulatory attorney said to me, he said, "Jim, you figured out how to come in over the transom," and that's exactly what we've done. So I don't see us ever having a physical presence in the United States. It will always be online. What I am hoping is, and as I described to you, it's taken us longer than I had expected, that this thing begins to catch on. And really where I want to see the biggest impact is on these Latino organizations that care very deeply and provide a huge amount of resources to the Latino community. They prioritize education, and they say it is about time that our community is attending college at rates closer to national averages and not at the levels that we are. And by the way, again, all demographically and statistically provable, the Latino community has one of the lowest household incomes in the United States.
Right.
And I think at some point, the Latino community has got to say, enough is enough. We've got to push college. And it's maybe not going to take Jim Enrique Tolbert sitting in Dallas to convince the Latino community that if I get enough Latino organizations that are saying, this is important to us, we've got to push this, we will begin to see changes.
What else do you want to say about Universidad, and it's Santander? Santander?
Universidad Santander.
Yeah, I totally crushed it at the beginning. So Universidad Santander. What else do you want to say about the university that maybe we haven't gone over? Anything at all? Open mic.
You know what? Thank you. I can't tell you, Joe, how much I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and talk to your listeners. I really am a firm believer in higher education. I do believe in the meritocracy that we live in the United States. Education is the key to that. And the only thing I would like to say is, to the extent that people who are involved in Latino organizations are leaders in Latino organizations, they sort of realize the importance of not only what I'm talking about, but become aware of a solution to the problem. And to the extent that the community sort of says, we've got to make this thing successful, and Universidad Santander is a great tool for us to change the narrative in this country, in the Latino community in higher education, those are the types of alliances I'm looking to build.
Well, there you have it, everyone. A great episode of the EdUp Experience podcast where we can bring on a guest who is bringing something very unique to the table and let you learn about it. Find out more about it at unisant.us. The site's in both English and Spanish, I know, because I was just on it. And, we thank you, Jim, for being here. And let me outro you the appropriate way. Ladies and gentlemen, he is the Chancellor of the Universidad Santander, Jim Enrique Tolbert. Jim, thanks for being here, man. We hope you had fun.
Absolutely my pleasure, and it was a blast. Thank you, Joe.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd.
If you're finding value in these conversations, consider supporting Elvin and Joe. As a supporter, you'll get early ad-free access, plus exclusive leadership-focused content. It's only $5.99 a month or $44.99 a year. You can also donate or even gift a subscription to a colleague at edupexperience.com. That's edupexperience.com.